Get ready with me as I tell you guys about the time that I confronted my homophobic professor. So this was when I first started university and I was taking one of those honors college readiness courses. So the professor had a PhD in art history, so she was trying to incorporate that into the class as much as she could, which is fine because we love art and we love history. So even though she had a bob, she had bangs with it, so I thought she was giving ally. But I was very wrong. And so for our final project presentation, we had to try to incorporate our major with art or an art movement. But first we had to submit a project proposal. So literally in this proposal draft, all we had to do was talk about like the art piece that we chose and why we chose it. And my major is environmental science, so I was like, how can I incorporate nature into art? So in my proposal, I suggested that I write about this piece called The Spiral Jetty. So I forget the name of the artist, but the piece itself was really interesting. So he created this little masterpiece like during low tide, so that way during high tide you couldn't see it, but then low tide, it unveiled this beauty. And so I thought this was perfect. I was like, I found the perfect combination of art history and environmental science to do this presentation over, right? So tell me why in her response to my prompt, she negates my suggestion completely. Instead, she has the audacity to suggest Piss Christ, which is literally a crucifix dipped in, you guessed it, piss. But it gets worse. Her other suggestion for me was the art movement, male engage in BDSM. And if you don't know what that is, just download Twitter/X and it'll fly right in front of you. Apparently it was some art movement. I don't think I've ever been more shocked than reading that response. And so if you're thinking, how did she know that you were gay? Well, if it's not already obvious because I'm pretty effeminate, the other day we had a class discussion just talking a lot about how women in their relationships with men inspired a lot of the art history back in the day. So I brought it up. I was like, oh, like, I wonder how LGBTQ relationships also inspired a lot of art since there was male artists creating the ideal man, you know what I mean? And it should have been a red flag for me when she was like, well, this is about the relationship between men and women. And I was like, okay, but there's more than one relationship system, especially in art historically, art history, right? I don't know. I don't have a PhD in art history, so maybe I don't know. And if you know me, you know I'm going to say my piece about this. So I confronted her. I didn't call her out in front of the class. I didn't start yelling with her. I went a few minutes early before class even started. And I was like, Miss Bob with the bang, why did you recommend me these really obscure topics instead of the topic that I thought was the perfect combination of environmental science and art history? She was like, oh, we discussed these pieces in class and I thought they would work well with you. And I was like, what drew you to that conclusion? My major's environmental science, so wouldn't you think I would try to stick to something like that? I'm not going to school for art history or Antichrist or BDSM. And she was like, I'm not going to argue with you about this. And I was like, it's not an argument, it's a question. So obviously I wasn't happy with her explanation and response, so I wanted to report this because I thought it was really unprofessional and it made me super uncomfortable to even be in that class anymore, even though this was the final project presentation. So I went to student services and I tried to file a complaint. I told them what happened, I showed them the prompt and her response. I told them that I approached her in class to try to nip this in the butt. She was like, I empathize and I sympathize with you, but do you mind telling me what you got for the grade? I was like, I got full credit, I got an A. And then she was like, and for the class? And I was like, also an A. But it's not like it's a hard class, it's a college readiness class. I mean, it was like 1 credit hour. She was like, technically there's nothing to report because she didn't discriminate against you academically. So apparently even if you're made to feel uncomfortable in class, but since your grades weren't affected, you're not allowed to file a report against homophobia. Needless to say, this professor had a huge ego and she was always talking about how she loved seeing everybody's rate my professor reviews because it makes her a better professor. So of course I left her a very hefty and honest review, and I made sure all of my peers went and liked it. So it was the #1 review on the app. So I know she saw it. But overall, it just like shocked me to my core and left like a bitter taste in my mouth. This is the final look though. Thank you guys so much if you stayed until the end of this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.